What practices, songs, books, memories, movies, art pieces, quotes, or other sweetnesses are your go-tos when you feel burdened? And what is in your hope toolbox? And so we kind of have this little zine station where people can craft. This is some of our associated text. The whole is where your book goes. It's in my arms right now. But this is a resting room with these different chaise loungers and some more of your work right here. I'm gonna kind of navigate over here as well. And you have some of the work right here. So the American dream is a scam, built on racial capitalism, imperialist conquest, and forced assimilation. And I'm going to walk you over here just to see the last two that are within the space. And there are 4 that are facing outward onto the kind of public campus property. So we have this one in this kind of main pillar area that precedes the resting room and is at the center of the space. And we also have Our Bodies Are Time Machines, evolved in harmony with pre-capitalist ecosystems and already primed for post-capitalist futures. Just some other work you are maybe not familiar with. Maria Porges has a text that's printed here in vinyl, said some thoughts on art and work. And otherwise, it's played on this audio track right here. All of this is kind of silenced for our talk together, but we have this stress ball that's kind of repetitively punched by Nancy Daly, and a machine that dispenses M&Ms every time she has an unread email. So we have a whole beautiful mess here on the floor, followed by this lovely work by Catherine Cornelius called Resolve, where she actually runs back and forth on the beach trying to vacuum up all the sand. So we have a really lovely kind of installation here. This is our wall text. Some of our audience members where you'll be kind of queuing in here. We have our living community archive where people can share resources with us. This is Ama Bey's work where she has made tobacco paper and talking about ancestry in the African diaspora and her family arriving in Virginia. And something I missed saying here is there's actually a running audio through these headsets. That's a sound bath by Ama Chandra. So that's just a little bit, and we're going to kind of walk our way back to where I'm going to be standing here shortly. But I just thought this would be nice for you to get a little context of the show and where your work exists. We have these kind of lovely pencil brooms so people can engage in active mess making. And we have this work by by Christine Wang, and it's of Kim Kardashian. And all right, I'm going to end this now, but I just wanted to give you a little rundown of the show and where your work was and how it's integrated. Beautiful. And right. That was kind of nice. Give her a sense of things. Didn't want to skip over anybody too much. Oh, I'm still in this, okay. We're recording.
Thank you so much, Mallory. That was really beautiful.
You're welcome.
Very apparent how much care and energy and labor and time have gone into it. Yeah, I'm just taking it in. It's really, really cool.
I'm so glad. Yeah, I mean, honestly, you as a grassroots kind of artist and organizer really is in the same likeness, and that's why I really wanted you to be a part of the show and such a significant part of the resting room space that I was working with my team over here creating. Okay, I think we're going to get started now. So if you don't mind just turning on your camera, that would be lovely. We're going to have some people kind of trickle in as we go, but might be a good time to start. Thank you. All right, so welcome to the space. My name is Mallory Kimmel, and I'm the curator of I Don't Dream of Labor. We are here at the Community College of Baltimore County on the Essex campus, which is formerly Piscataway and Susquehannock land. I wanted to take the moment to have a lovely conversation with Chiara Francesca and talk more about what who she is in regards to being an artist and an author. I wanted to read the bio on the back of the book that they wrote. We will build new compasses, magic moments of seeding more just worlds. And what Chiara is a queer disabled artist, writer, organizer, acupuncturist, former teen mother, first generation college grad, and Italian immigrant in occupied indigenous territories currently known as the United States. So, welcome. And what
Thank you so much. Yeah, let me know if the audio is working or not, if there's anything that needs to shift to make this work better for y'all. Yeah, just let me know.
You are wonderful. Thank you so much. I would like to just read the dedication you have here in your book, and I'd like to hear kind of an explanation, a little bit of an elaboration on this and how your experiences informed your work. So, without further ado, I'd like to read this. So it says, "This is for all the misfits, the fuck ups, the one who cannot fit in, for all the ones at the margins, the fighters and weirdos of this world." For all the ones who are living with childhood trauma and trying to create lives that are not dictated by it, for all the ones attempting the daring, heartbreaking, magical work of dreaming up and growing more just futures. I love you. I see you. I'm grateful for you. So, again, I'd love to hear from you on how some of your experiences have shaped your work, both the book and or your visual work.
I mean, I think our experiences shape everything we do, and how we move through the world. I think that the tricky part of that is to not let our experiences influence us in a way that is destructive. And I think that's what has been a lot harder, to wade through, because we are dealt the cards that we are dealt with, and we there's a lot we cannot control, in how we come to the world. And I think that most of my life has been a lot of it has been like fighting against the the conditions that I was dropped in, and using coping mechanisms that were fairly destructive, as well, because I didn't know any better. And then like slowly trying to come to terms with the conditions, not try to run away from them, and also um, learn which parts were in my power to change, and if not to change, to navigate from a place of choice instead of like knee jerk reacting. Yeah, and I don't know if that's too vague, but I'll stop there.
No, that's a beautiful overview, and I want to thank you for that. I think something that's also really true to shaping our experiences is our education, right? Education can be pinnacle in lifting us up and or tearing us down. And I was really interested in hearing about kind of the way in which you navigated your time as you entered the School of Art of Chicago, excuse me, the School of Art Institute of Chicago, and understanding kind of your background coming from more of a collectivist society and culture and community, and kind of how shifting into uh, an institution that's very individualized, kind of how that affected you, because this is an extremely poignant conversation for the student body of CCBC, because I would say Baltimore is another very collectivist minded area, and the School of Art Institute of Chicago is one of like the three main schools our students transfer to.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that school for me was a way to stop, like, I was working minimum wage jobs, and trying to feed my two kids. I have twins, that I had when I was 17, and I was cashiering at a grocery store making minimum wage. And I mean, yeah, I'm just gonna say it and then you all can ask follow-up questions. But I literally was like, all right, we don't have money to eat or to pay rent. And if I go to school, I can get student loans and that's gonna allow us to survive, which is a terrible idea. But at the time it was just survival. Like it was like I need to eat, my kids need to eat. Going to school and getting student loans feels like a better choice than some of the alternatives, right? So I did that, um, um, and have an insane amount of student loan right now. Um, and I'm down to talk about that part of it as well. And then inside of that, I feel like I started learning, or like my BA, like I started going to school for like international studies, and thinking that, I would just get whatever job would allow us to eat, maybe teaching Italian or something. And then I took art classes as electives. And it was like the only thing that was making me happy, like inside of like a really stressful time and a lot of like, yeah, a lot of stuff that was difficult. And I just couldn't drop it. Like I feel like I was taking art classes and it became like a place of refuge. And yeah, so when I decided to go to art school for grad school, I had a very, naive idea that like art is where people try to make the world better, and that I thought art school, grad school would be full of like revolutionary people. I don't know, like community, and like people that were trying to build a better world. I had no idea about the art world. Like I legit didn't know anything or had any connection to the art world. So grad school, a lot of it was just like a wake up call as to like how art and capital, come together to create this thing called the art world. And yeah, facing that reality.
Well, I think
Um,
there's something,
yeah.
yeah, I'll throw something in there just to kind of bounce off what you said. I'm very similar. I also am a first generation college student, and I also really naively had no idea about what the art world entailed. And when I looked at something like an MFA program, I had the same, blissful ignorance. I went in, and I think that the truth is the intention or the way in which we think others are going to meet us is the way in which we want to meet others. So I think it speaks really to your character and the ethos of your work in the way that you wanted to jump into your MFA program from a place of trying to solve the world's problems and by doing so collaboratively. So I really want to kind of pinpoint that and also give reverence to that being kind of the crux of your work in and of itself. Can you speak a little bit more about how you came into the work that you're doing now?
Yeah. By accident is the real answer. And also, it's like I feel like things in life happen by accident, and also you realize that like everything has been building upon each step until you get where you are. But sometimes you don't know where you're going until you get there. And I still don't know where I'm going, like 100%, like at all. Um, but so I went to art school. I graduated from art school, like, pretty heartbroken and like confused about like this thing called art that I thought was a force of love in the world, and then what I saw in school was not that, it was like a lot of competition, a lot of like, people being shitty to each other, honestly. And yeah, and then I started teaching as a adjunct after school in the community college in Chicago and the arts high school. And that was like a really low point because y'all, it does not like I was like, I'm gonna go to grad school and then that's gonna be a way to get out of poverty. And then I got out and realized that even teaching college as an adjunct, right? Like it honestly wasn't making much more than the cashiering job. Like it was pretty much making the same amount. Um So went through like another crisis and also got really sick, like physically, and decided to go to acupuncture school, because acupuncture was one of the things that really helped when I was really sick. So I went to acupuncture school, started a sliding scale, like pay what you can clinic in Chicago, um, like as an acupuncture practitioner. And then the pandemic hit. And so, the clinic had to close down, and I found myself in the house, um, and like just started making digital art because it was me and a computer and my kids in an apartment, kind of like in the pandemic, so like with all the stuff that the pandemic brought. That's it. I mean, I just started putting stuff up on the internet, like just being like, I don't know, I'm making this stuff in the house, and just putting my thoughts and my heart into them. Um, and that was in 2020, So yeah, and to my great shock and surprise, and I'm still in the shock and surprise, like it seems like some of it resonated with people. Yeah.
Well, I have to say that I'm definitely one of those people because I remember seeing some of your work posted in 2020 when I was at home, trapped in the house, just like you and everybody else, and was actually seeing my experience mirrored back to me through your work. And so I thought it was extremely poignant and extremely touching. And it's kind of what it was actually what planted the seed in my request and having you be a part of the show. So I really want to thank you for that. I think that something I would like to bring into focus in the context of the show is the show's called Utter Dream of Labor, but in many cases it is including both artists and healing practitioners. And so you are a beautiful example of kind of existing in both worlds. And so I'm curious to see in your mind's eye where acupuncture and like art, kind of come together, because they at least exist dualistically within you.
Yeah, I mean, I think with that, I really want to speak of like the lineage that grounds me in that, which is I came to acupuncture through the Allied Media Conference, which has been a conference in Detroit of like organizers, artists, coming together every year. And at the time, I was doing gender violence prevention work as a volunteer at a crisis line. And in the ER. And I was also doing like a Pages to Prisoner, like working at, not volunteering at Pages to Prisoners to like send books to incarcerated people. And yeah, there's like, you know, family stuff with that, like why I made those choices to get involved in those things. And also I was parenting. So I went to the conference, like, with this kind of like ethos of like running myself into the ground. And they had a healing space at the conference. And that's the first time I got acupuncture was there. Like, it was free. Like you just sat and somebody put like needles in your ears. And the conference was a place where people that then became like the architects of the healing justice framework came together to say, like, in our movements, we need healing as central to them, like, because so many, like all of us, right, like come to the movements with trauma, and if we don't address it inside the movements, we're not going to be able to like build the world that we need. And I want to name Susan Raffel, Kara Page, Adela Neves, um, uh, Autumn Brown. I mean, there's a bunch of people, and there's a book called The Healing Justice, on healing justice that Kara Page and Susan Raffel wrote that delineates this history. So I just want to name that. That's how I came into it. Yeah, and I also want to name that through that I learned the radical history of acupuncture in the U.S. right through the Young Lords and the Black Panthers who used acupuncture in the 1970s to support addiction recovery and PTSD recovery in the Bronx at Lincoln Detox Hospital, and taught community and each other how to do acupuncture. Um, so there's a long history of that. And I also want to name that acupuncture, comes from East Asia, has been used in ways in the United States that benefit, capitalism and white supremacy, and that have, left out the very people that have created the medicine. So again, it's a complicated history. There's a lot there. I just want to name a little bit of it. And the way in which it all comes together, to me, it's kind of in the healing justice ethos that, like, healing and life and movement and struggle are one thing, right? And like they cannot exist one without the other. And that, to me, like, art as that same spirit, like that art is just another way to address our current conditions and to hopefully feed our hearts enough to where we want to live another day and build something different.
That was so beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, again, so much to your credit and so much in the same conversation. I too went to a symposium very similar. It's called "How Can We Gather Now?" put on by Washington Project for the Arts in DC. And Adrienne Marie Brown spoke there as well. And that was an extremely telling opportunity and experience for me to see more people integrating different forms of kind of, I don't know, having these kinds of open conversations on how we can establish community and conversation in a really profound way. And I think in some ways that helped inspire this show, whether directly or indirectly. And to your credit, what you're saying about having these free acupuncture workshops that introduced you, we're having in the week of April, we have a couple programs going on. On April 15th and 16th, I'm going to be in the gallery offering hands-on or hands-off Reiki for free for people who want to come in. And on the 20th of April, we have a workshop day where I'll be having an artist talk with Amachandra, the sound artist here from Baltimore. And she's going to be reflecting on the relationship of dream incantations and relating that to the title of the show, I Don't Dream of Labor. And she'll be doing a sound bath in the space for everyone, also for free, followed by a biodanza kind of collective Chilean, that's the word I'm going for, Chilean dance with everybody. And that's kind of, biodanza is a form of dance that's supposed to be the poetics of human encounter. So again, all these different ways of trying to enter the position of embodiment is quite literally really important for us to gather, to relate to one another, and to move through collective and individual trauma. I wanted to ask you about kind of the series of work that you have. The first is the one that says the American dream is a scam. And clearly a lot of your work has to do with power dynamics and kind of how one exists when they're not accounted for in these power dynamics and how to kind of navigate these tricky waters. So I was curious if you could explain kind of what kind of prompted you to make this work and kind of how you go about making these compositions.
I'm trying to remember that one in particular. I mean, I think there's like two things. Like, one is that, yeah, I grew up in a country that was like very intensely subjected to American propaganda through, movies, media, like all that. Like, I definitely grew up with the idea of America being better than, definitely where I was, than anyone else, that and there's a history there in terms of also like World War II, and like I grew up with my grandparents, and they definitely had stories of American tanks coming in and that signifying the end of the war. So there has been kind of this uh these ways in which, like, I was brainwashed, to think of America as all the things, right? Like all the positive things of the American dream. Um, and I immigrated and saw the reality of it, which is very different. One, and two, just I think I made that thing like when their restrictions, the pandemic restrictions were being eased, and this idea of the American dream, like in mainstream culture, in the media, in the way like politicians were talking about it, was very much being like shoved down people's throats in terms of like we are going back to normal, and this is what normal looks like. And that fitting into the American dream in terms of like consumption, like going back to normal means like working more, buying more, like, and all of it was connected to money, without any mind to like the suffering that had just occurred, the suffering that was still occurring, the grief of like death on a massive scale, like all the stuff, that COVID had brought, like the uprisings. Yeah, so I think it came from like a place of like wanting to poke holes, at that narrative, inside myself and outside myself as well.
Thank you. I also love that you said you're trying to remember this exact piece. And I say that because we've talked before formerly, and you mentioned how there is a level of lack of preciousness you kind of take with the handling of your work. And I would love for you to kind of elaborate on that in terms of kind of where your work exists, and once it leaves you, you're kind of handling of that, right? Like the bestowing and the trust in sharing it with me in order to put it in the show, and any other kind of way in which you show and share your work.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something that just feels like contending with reality. It's like I cannot control what happens to what I make, um, nor I want to. Like, I think if I chose to try to control it, it would take over my whole life, and that's not how I want to live, Um, and also, like, I can feel it in my body, that like control feels bad. Like it feels like a contraction. It feels like a tightening of my muscles. Like it feels like a closing in. Um, which doesn't mean that we don't have boundaries, right? Like I think that that's the thing. Like surrendering in a way that does not mean not having boundaries, but it means, like, for me at least, that I'm okay with the work just taking on whatever life it needs to have. And also part of that is knowing that like it's not really my work, like I am an individual person living inside of a network of connections, of histories, of experiences. So like whatever comes through me that then comes out into these things that are made is not really mine. Like it comes from everything I read, it comes from every conversation I had, it comes from like generations of people that have thought about these things before me. It comes from like being in relationship to the land, like, so in that way it just feels like I'm just like a gatherer of things, and then it becomes like an offering out, and then it goes back, into the network in that way. Like once it comes out of my body and it's out there, it's it's back into like the constellations of everything that exists. And also, like, I think part of that is, growing up in a collective culture. And I will say, like, in movements in Italy, like in social justice movements, like people you tend to not even write their name on their art. Like people make stuff um anonymously a lot, and part of that idea, again, it's like we don't want to put like individuals on a pedestal. We want to feed the movement. um yeah, and being aware that like when we put individuals on a pedestal, like one, we separate them out so that they're more vulnerable actually, right? Like they're more vulnerable to attack, they're more vulnerable to um yeah, to all sorts of stuff. I mean, we've seen that, you know, in like the civil rights movement in the US. We see that now too, you know, when we have these kind of like figures, they become more vulnerable. It's also dehumanizing, right? To put people on a pedestal. It sets them apart from the rest of the group. Um, and it also at the same time gives us the illusion that like some of us are more important than others. And that's just not true, you know? Like it's like we all have gifts and we all have uh, faults, and we all have things to offer. And I think just trying to like refuse the the like I don't know, like the hyper individualization and the kind of like putting putting people on pedestals, or even the idea of like the artist as like this genius that, you know, like works in a corner and like they just their brain is better than everybody else, you know? And it's like, no, 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 no. Like we all have that capacity. Like what is different a lot of times it's like space and support and resources, you know? Like, yeah. Sorry if that was rambly, but
No, no, that was fabulous. I have one final question before we are going to open it up for questions from the audience. But looking at your book, We Will Build a New Compass, Magic Moments of Seeding More Just Worlds. If you could give us just kind of a bite-sized piece on this, what is the direction? How do we essentially approach creating more just worlds?
I definitely don't have the answer for that. The answer to that is together. Um, yeah. We do it together. And inside of that, I think that one of the things in you know American culture that is really hard is that it successfully is built in a way that fragments us, right? So what I've been really thinking about is like what are the conditions that allow for togetherness to happen. um and I'm even thinking about like the presence of public spaces, right? Like how, like in a city, right? Like where can people gather? What is the role of like police in scaring people away from public spaces? Like, um, where are we spending public money? You know, and how what would be needed, right, for us to come out of our houses and meet our neighbors and create relationships of care and trust with each other at a systems level, right? Like I feel like a lot of what gets talked about is like what can we do individually, but like yes, there's a lot we can do individually, but we also all live inside of systems. And again, I think part of, you know, being an immigrant, it's like you're always holding a multiplicity of realities inside yourself. Like it's like, you know, I know that people at home in my hometown like gather and are able to have like relationships of friendships and all that easier, not because they're better people, but because, you know, like where I'm like the town I'm from, like you can walk everywhere. Like you walk to the grocery store, you walk to the library, I don't know, you like walk to church, you know, not that I go to church, but like people's lives are intersect because of how the environment is, right? And when I think about Chicago, like where I live, what makes it really hard for me, you know, to have connections with other people and to organize is like I often don't have the capacity to, you know, drive 40 minutes to my friend's house to see them, right? Or like if I go outside and it's highways and cement and like um yeah, like I'm not gonna want to go outside, or it's so yes, it's more of a question, you know, than an answer, but I think it's really like committing to and thinking about like what are the conditions that allow for more togetherness to happen, and pouring energy into that is to my answer today. Tomorrow might be a different one.
That's wonderful. Yeah, very much also centering around the built environment and creating and shifting a built environment conducive for community building. I would also say sounds resonant with what you said. Do we have any questions? Anybody have a question? Okay, you.
Hi. Um, I would imagine that I can't imagine, I guess, having two children, at, it sounds like at a very young age, and then going and working and supporting those children. And I would imagine that that would be that you would need that community. One thing that I've, as a mom, I think the lack of community in our culture is hard with being a parent. And so I'm curious, I guess, about how you found community, maybe as a mom, and also how your children have impacted or continue to impact, or maybe haven't, or just the relationship between being a mom and, especially at such a young age, through, the process of becoming an artist, and how maybe your children impacted that. So it's kind of a rambling question, but maybe.
No, I love it. And I mean, thank you for sharing also about, like your experience, which, yeah, really mirrors again, these reality I think we're finding ourselves in, which is like there's a lot of hard shit in life that we cannot, like get away from. But the thing about it, I think, is that we're not supposed to hold it alone, like we're not supposed to hold grief alone. We're not supposed to hold caretaking alone. We're not supposed to hold sickness alone, like, and that I really see that when those things are held together, we can get through them, and when they're not, that's when it feels unbearable, at least to me, again. Um, and I would say community has been elusive in my life. Like there has been time where I've felt support and care and connection. There has been time where I didn't, and that also has shifted with disability stuff. Like it sucks, but like I will say that in times where I have been more close to able-bodied, like it's been a lot easier to access community. And in times that I've been less less more disabled, as disability is like not a fixed thing, right? The hardest thing about disability, besides like the physical pain and like the reality of the day to day, has been isolation, right? And I think with parenting it feels really similar, like that the times that were hard was the isolation of it, more than like the day-to-day labor of like, cleaning, cooking, helping my kids do their homework, making sure that their clothes are washed, like the labor of care, right? That is part of parenting, plus the stress of like money, that was part of like my whole life with them. My kids are now 24, so they are on their way to being full as grown adults. And our relationship has changed for the better, like I feel like now I just get to enjoy them as people, and I'm not like in the terror, right, of like, how do I feed you, like how do I clothe you, how do we have a safe apartment to come back to, um yeah, I'll stop there. I don't know if I answered it, and if there's like a follow-up to that, let me know.
Do we have another question? We just said that we're enjoying the last answer from the former question. Derek, do you have a question? You seem to answer all of our questions. I want to say thank you so much. It's been absolutely a delight and a pleasure to have you both in the show and today here with us on Teams. If there's anything you would like to say before you would leave, I'd love to give you the time and space to do so.
I mean, I want to thank you for your labor. I want to thank all the people that are running the gallery, keeping the lights on, cleaning those floors, stocking the freaking toilet paper in the bathroom, right? Like doing all the things that allow it to be open to, I want to just thank you for your labor and your vision. And I want to extend like a wish for all of you all, to have like your hearts taken care of, to have your bodies nourished, to have the rest that you need to show up in a way that feels aligned with your heart, and to forgive yourself for the times where you're not able to do that, because we are living in a really rough moment, so we're doing the best we can, and just to extend care out to you all, and a lot of gratitude.
All right, thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful and blessed day.
Thank you. Bye, y'all.
That was sweet. Yeah. She's great.
She is great.